Imagine a proud young soldier in the 1500s, armor polished, sword glinting under the Spanish sun, his heart ablaze with dreams of glory. His name was Íñigo López de Loyola. He lived for honor, for battle, for women's admiration and men's envy. But one cannonball, one single moment, shattered his leg and his destiny. That explosion did not only destroy his body, it broke his illusions. Lying helpless in his family castle, stripped of everything that once defined him, Íñigo began a new kind of battle, not with swords and enemies, but with his own soul. This is the story of how a man obsessed with worldly victory became a soldier of the spirit, how pain became his teacher, and how silence forged a movement that would reshape the church and the world. This is the story of Saint Ignatius of Loyola. In the early 16th century, Spain was a land of conquests, explorers sailing across oceans, soldiers fighting for kingdoms, and nobles dreaming of eternal fame. Born in 1491 in the Basque region, young Íñigo Loyola grew up surrounded by tales of knights, castles, and crusades. He wasn't born a saint. In fact, he was the opposite. He loved the glitter of court life, the thrill of duels, and the admiration of noble ladies. His idols were not apostles or martyrs. They were heroes of romance novels, the warriors who won battles and hearts alike. At court, Íñigo served as a page to the Duke of Nájera. He learned strategy, diplomacy, and the fine art of vanity. He believed he was destined for greatness, not spiritual greatness, but earthly triumph. He wanted to carve his name into history with a sword, not with prayer. But God has his own way of writing stories. In 1521, the French army invaded the Spanish city of Pamplona. Íñigo, despite being outnumbered, refused to surrender. He stood on the fortress wall, urging his soldiers to fight on. Then suddenly, a thunderous sound, a flash of heat. A cannonball smashed into his leg, shattering the bone and ending his military career forever. The proud warrior was carried back to his family castle in Loyola, where surgeons, without anesthesia, cut, broke, and reset his leg multiple times. He screamed, he prayed, he cursed. When they told him he might never walk again, his pride broke harder than his bones. Lying in bed, he asked for something to read, stories of knights and romance. But his family only had two books, The Life of Christ and The Lives of the Saints. Reluctantly, he opened them, and what he found there changed everything. At first, he read out of boredom, but soon, the words began to pierce deeper than any sword ever had. He saw Christ, humble, suffering, courageous, and something inside him stirred. He read about Saint Francis of Assisi and Saint Dominic, men who had once chased the world, but found peace in renunciation. He began to notice something strange. When he dreamed of returning to battle or winning a lady's love, he felt excited for a moment, but empty afterward. But when he imagined serving God, he felt peace, a deep, lasting peace. He later called this discovery the discernment of spirits. It was the birth of his spiritual vision, the realization that true joy never leaves the soul once the emotion fades. This insight would one day become the foundation of his spiritual exercises, one of the most influential works of Christian mysticism ever written. But at that time, he was just a wounded soldier trying to understand his own heart. Months passed. His leg healed, but his pride did not. He walked with a limp, a constant reminder that he was no longer who he used to be. So he decided to make a pilgrimage, not to the battlefield, but to the shrine of Our Lady of Montserrat. There, under the shadow of the Black Madonna, he laid down his sword and dagger, literal symbols of his old self. He kept vigil through the night, confessing his sins, crying, trembling, praying. At dawn, he left behind his noble clothes and dressed in the rough garments of a beggar. He walked away as Inigo the Knight and began his new life as Ignatius the Pilgrim. It was not a heroic transformation in a single moment. He would still struggle, fall, and doubt. But something irreversible had begun. The fire of vanity had turned into the flame of love. After Montserrat, Ignatius spent nearly a year in Manresa, a small town near Barcelona. He lived in a cave, fasting, praying, weeping, battling his thoughts. It was there that his true conversion began. He faced not the enemy's sword, but his own darkness, scruples, guilt, pride, despair. He would spend hours examining every sin of his life, sometimes falling into near madness. But slowly, through contemplation, he began to understand that God's love is greater than human failure. He saw that holiness wasn't about punishing oneself, but about surrendering. In the stillness of that cave, he began writing down insights and methods for prayer, reflections on how the soul moves, how desires deceive, and how grace heals. These notes became the seed of his masterpiece, the spiritual exercises. One day, while praying by the river Cardinal, he experienced what he later described as an illumination. Everything seemed new. The world appeared to me in a different light. I understood how God dwells in all things, in the stars, the earth, the people, in everything. This vision became the heart of Ignatian spirituality, finding God in all things. From that moment, the warrior of glory became a warrior of the divine, disciplined, strategic, fearless. But now his battlefield was the soul of humanity. Ignatius decided to devote his life completely to serving Christ. But first he had to learn, truly learn. Despite being over 30 years old, he enrolled in school alongside children to study Latin, then philosophy and theology. He was mocked, humiliated, even imprisoned by the Inquisition, who suspected his mystical experiences. But his humility grew stronger. Eventually, he went to the University of Paris, where he met a small group of friends who shared his passion for God. Among them, Francis Xavier and Peter Faber. In a tiny chapel in Montmartre in 1534, they made a vow to live in poverty and chastity, to go to the Holy Land if possible, and to dedicate their lives to the service of Christ and the Church. When war blocked their journey to Jerusalem, they went to Rome, offering themselves to the Pope. There, Ignatius founded a new order, the Society of Jesus, later known as the Jesuits. Their motto was simple yet powerful: Ad majorem Dei gloriam, for the greater glory of God. They would become teachers, missionaries, scholars, reformers. They would cross oceans, challenge kings, build schools, and shape minds across continents. Under Ignatius's leadership, they combined military discipline with spiritual depth, becoming the Church's most dynamic force for renewal. Ignatius led them not as a general commanding soldiers, but as a father guiding souls. He taught them discernment, obedience, and above all, interior freedom. Love, he said, is shown more in deeds than in words. Ignatius's greatest legacy is not a structure, but a spiritual method. His spiritual exercises are not simply prayers. They are a training of the heart, a boot camp for the soul. They teach one to see where God is leading, how to choose rightly, and how to detach from ego and illusion. Every exercise is a moment of confrontation between desire and truth, between illusion and love. He believed that the world is filled with both spirits that console and spirits that deceive. Our task is to discern which is which. Through meditation, reflection, and imaginative prayer, he taught Christians how to experience God, not as a distant king, but as a friend walking beside them. His insights shaped not only theology, but psychology centuries before the word existed. Where medieval spirituality focused on fear, Ignatius focused on awareness. Where others preached withdrawal, he preached engagement, finding God in work, in art, in love, in creation. He was, in every sense, a strategist of the soul. Ignatius led the Jesuits until his death in 1556. He never returned to the battlefield, but he fought every day against pride, against fatigue, against the temptation to control rather than trust. His letters reveal a man both firm and tender, a general who commanded not through power, but through love. He suffered from chronic pain, poor health, and sleepless nights. But until his last breath, he prayed, "Take, Lord, and receive all my liberty, my memory, my understanding, and my entire will. Give me only your love and your grace. That is enough for me." It was the prayer of a man who once wanted everything and ended wanting only God. When he died, he left behind not riches, not monuments, but a movement that would educate millions, convert nations, and inspire thinkers from Descartes to Pope Francis. The soldier of Loyola had conquered the only empire that lasts, the empire of the Spirit. The story of Ignatius is not about perfection, it's about transformation. He began as a man of ego and ended as a man of surrender. He proved that holiness is not the absence of desire, but the redirection of it. In every human heart, there's a battlefield between the self we want to be and the self God calls us to become. Ignatius teaches us that losing one war may be the beginning of winning a far greater one. You don't have to be a saint to begin. You become one by taking the first step. So perhaps the real question is not, what are you fighting for? But, who are you fighting with? Your ego or your soul? Because in the end, every battle of life is a spiritual one. And like Ignatius discovered in that dark cave of Manresa, the greatest victory is not to conquer the world, but to let God conquer you.